And now I'd like to invite on stage for the sponsor perspective portion of our program, Felix Matos Rodriguez, president of Queens College. President Matos Rodriguez has served as president of Queens College since 2014.
Great, thanks.
And is one
Thanks
of
so
the
much.
few educators in the country who has been both president of a baccalaureate and community college institution. And joining him on stage is Sarita Brown, president of Excelencia in Education. Prior to co-founding Excelencia, Sarita worked at prominent educational institutions and at the highest levels of government to help improve academic outcomes for low-income and minority students. Sarita, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. This conversation is exciting for Excelencia in Education because we want to make sure that as the national agenda is set, Latinos are a focal point. A country's most precious resource is its human resource. All of us in education know that, and we work to develop the talent that is America. This is for us at Excelencia in Education, a 1-2 punch. Today's briefing is part of an event that we started yesterday with a group called Presidents for Latino Student Success. These are 61 institutional leaders across the country who have stepped forward and publicly said, I'm working to make my institution a learning environment where Latino students thrive. You have on your table analysis that we've done, both about Latino college completion, as well as the pathway within institutions, through institutions, and into our life, economy, civil society. So to be able to sit down with a representative from Presidents for Latino Student Success, a good friend for many years, and a colleague, the president of Queens College, to talk about this idea of results, using data to affect change. That's our springboard.
Yep, and it's a reason why I decided to be part of this initiative to connect deeper with Excelencia, who's been doing phenomenal work in showcasing what works for Latino student success, looking around the country and showcasing those examples and helping us to scale them up and say, there's many things out there that are positive. We just need to be more aware of them. We need to be better connected in terms of using data to make our decisions. So for me, it was a chance to connect more with Excelencia, and I'm sure that also speaks of the other 61 presidents who are part of the group, and also it's a very public way to say Latino student success matters, and unless we have leadership sort of making sure the changes that are needed for that to occur, we're not going to have the kind of systemic change that we want. So it's an honor for me, and I know that for my colleagues too, many of them who are in the audience, that's the case too. And it's also an opportunity to let people know that in this, we're focusing on Latino student success. Those are not either or propositions, right? We have people here today connected with work in the Hill. So I'm going to give you one homework. I'm a teacher, so I always have homework for folks. And one is support HSI funding. Right? HSI funding is very, very crucial. It's been a key way that we've been able, many of the examples that you'll find in Excelencia of things that have worked come from grants that are a result of that. And this year we got a little blip in an increase, but it's been going down for the past decade when Latino enrollment and the number of HSIs has increased, right? So those two things are going in the wrong direction. So we need to, as we think about reauthorization, as we think about sort of budget approval, we need to be more supportive of HSI funding. One common myth is that HSI funding only supports Latinos, right? And I can give an example in my own institution of a STEM grant that we are revisiting all our entry-level and gateway STEM courses in partnership with our main feeder community college with an HSI STEM grant. Latino students are going to do better if we keep do a good job there, but that transformation is going to help every student at Queens College and at Queensboro Community College. So we can do both. We can do things that we know work for Latino student success, and we can do that lifting all boats in our campuses.
I think that's a wonderful touch point for the dynamic that founds Excelencia's point of view. One of the things that we talk about is any enterprise using a Latino lens. And so the question of how any institution uses its resources and what it uses to benchmark success. We've overtly said that our coin of the realm is student success. So talk a little bit about, not perhaps at Queens, but at other institutions, that process of keeping the institution strong and vibrant, but then what are the means to take, we've heard a lot about legislation, we've heard a lot about the challenges, we've heard a lot about the long-term effects, but then you are an institutional leader with a team. How do you actually then say, on my watch, student success will be what we do?
Well, again, there's not a cookie cutter approach, and I can talk about, for example, having been the president of a community college that was 60% Latino, right? Ostos Community College, now moving to Queens, which is more representative of the borough, which is 25% Latino. We became an HSI 3 years ago, 25% Asian, sort of more representative. So you need to adjust your leadership to the institution that you're guiding. In the case, for example, of Ostos, we had some things that the CUNY system was doing, the program ASAP, right? And so we looked at how we could tweak some of those things to support our Latino students better. We ended up creating a student success coaching program, right? Model after data, things that we learned from Excelencia, but it was to pretty much beef up the advising that the students were getting so that they could make better choices, stay in school, and we had better information about what they were experiencing, and we could be very supportive of them in their academic and their personal journey. When I've been at Queens, we became an HSI 3 years ago, and I said, normally, the president doesn't, you review the grants, but that happens at the academic level. Anything dealing with HSI, you need to include me, right? Because I want to make sure that we're doing it for the right reasons and that we're using the information correctly, ultimately having the students in mind. And also you make sure you have a team that's diverse. You make sure that you're mentoring the next generation of leaders in the faculty who are going to become deans and administrators and department chairs and all the people who are going to make decisions that are going to be helping our students. So it's when you're the president, you have a comprehensive view, and you need to sort of know where the the points of pressures are to be able to make a difference.
And in terms of internally driven accountability, and there's a lot of discussions about change that has, particularly within state institutions, been about the dynamic of either state legislators imposing certain kinds of prescriptive ways. What you've just described is something that's driven internally. How do you get ahead of that? How do you make the case before somebody puts it on you?
Well, I think that and actually that'd be a great research project. It shows that when things occur by legislative fiat, they're usually not as nuanced as we would like them to be in higher ed, and they're usually blunt instruments. So I think we have a responsibility to the extent that we can to try to get ahead of the curve and try to be proactive before those interventions occur. And we have an example in New York State about the transfer of credits from community colleges to the four-year colleges, something that in some state has been very, very prescribed. We got ahead of the curve as in CUNY, and we created pathways, which was a way to try to solve an issue about the students who were coming from community college and their credits not transferring from what is one system. That was one example in which we saw the writing in the wall. We saw it happen in some other states, and we decided that we wanted to do something with faculty governance, all the things that we value in higher ed that addressed an issue and prevented a more clumsy cookie cutter approach from coming that might have a whole bunch of unintended consequences. So I think that it behooves us to be ahead of the curve. That's why the network of Excelencia is important, because you get to find out what's happening in different states, and you can learn from what's being done there and use that to lobby in your own state and then nationally too.
And then beyond mechanics and actual implementation is still the bedrock of how you get it done, but there's also the influence of a sector. And you and I have known each other for many years. And in that time, the role of higher education in shaping America's concept of itself, how it perpetuates thinking among its students. Here we are in Gallup, and there's all kinds of analysis about this divide that's happening in our country and how it's getting partisan about the role of higher education. We come from a time where it was good to have an opportunity to thrash through ideas and find out who you are and who you are in terms of race and ethnicity and gender. What's your view now?
Well, I think that we became a little bit complacent And I think it's part of the work that we need to do every day in terms of reminding people about the transformational work that we do in higher ed, always being subject to criticism and improvement and adopting what's new in the times to what we do. But I think absolutely that sort of public compact that between civil society and higher ed, we need to be out there every day letting people know why it matters and how it is transformational for the community that's making an investment, particularly when you talk about public higher ed, and the individual too. And I think that sometimes we feel that this is so obvious to those who are inside, and we forget that we need to make the case time and time again about what that value proposition is. And I think that if we do it, and there's no better example than our alumni and our students to convey that, when you do that, people make a connection. But I think it's just part of the daily grind. It's part of the things that we need to do. And I embrace that with gusto. I embrace that with, many of the things I've been able to achieve individually resulted from public education giving a chance to my parents back in Puerto Rico way back. And I'm very clear about the transformational effect that had on my family, on myself, and my children. I want to be part of that story being replicated a lot more, but we need to be out there reminding people and also being self-critical. When things go wrong, we need to admit it, step up, change it, and improve.
And that, I think, is emblematic of the kind of spirit that we have within the opportunities that Excelencia has every day to work with institutional leaders. 61 of them in 16 states and Washington, D.C. enroll 1.4 million undergraduate students. 40% of them are Latino. Their completion rates, 32% of undergraduates earning degrees. And an area I keep referencing where we know each other from graduate education, 15% of all Latino graduate degree recipients nationally are from those 61 institutions. The point that the president just made about being out there, this was really why we at Excelencia in Education wanted to work with the Hill and with Gallup to hold this event. We want to make clear that even as the challenges increase, the energy and the leadership is there to rise to the occasion. And we're very pleased to have this opportunity to think publicly, to talk publicly, but most importantly, to act to affect change. It's really a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure,
for the
Zayden, and
conversation.
thank you again to all of you for listening.